The Beauty and the Beast fairy tale has had countless adaptations to the big screen, but Disney's 1991 and 2017 iterations are probably the most recognizable releases due to Walt Disney Company's place in American culture. In 1991, the animated classic was praised for its heroine Belle because she reads books. This iteration was also marketed as the most beautiful love story ever told on its poster. With this claim in mind, I want to explore the original fairy tale and Disney's animated and live-action versions. In particular, I'm going to analyze the way the film's portrayal of gender and romantic relationships compares to the original fairy tales and the real-world implications of depicting this as the most beautiful love story ever told. The original tale, published in the 18th century with the moral of teaching what good French girls should strive to be, introduces Beauty as the youngest daughter of a merchant who becomes penniless, and while the rest of her siblings struggle to adjust to lower-class life, Beauty is quite the angel in the house. The Beast offers her father shelter on his travels, but when her father attempts to take a rose from his garden for Beauty, he tells him either one of his daughters or himself must die for the transgression. Still, before allowing him to return to his family, the Beast offers him a chest full of valuables and to send it to his home. During Beauty's imprisonment, Beast proposes to her every day and she refuses, but builds a friendship with him. When he relents and allows her to return to her family because of her ill father, she sees the unhappiness of her sisters who married for money and realizes she is in love with the Beast, returns to him to confess her love, and finally accept his proposal. He is then transformed back into a prince and they live happily ever after. The 1991 animated film takes the plot's emphasis away from Beauty, an only child called Belle in this version, and her piousness and humility, and instead places it on Beast and his journey to becoming a gentleman worthy of Belle. Faith Dickens uses the term narrative of male reform to describe an exclusive focus on male change, its propagation of female innocence, and its idealization of domestic space and domestic virtue. This is made obvious by the way the animation begins with a stained glass retelling of how the Beast was cursed, and the emphasis throughout the film placed on making Belle fall for him in order to lift the curse. Further, he fails to make an effort to change until he saves her life and she proves to be as strong-willed as he is.
Now. Oh, don't do that. Just hold still.
That hurts!
If you'd hold still, it wouldn't hurt as much.
Well, if you hadn't have run away, this wouldn't have happened.
If you hadn't frightened me, I wouldn't have run away.
Well, you shouldn't have been in the West Wing!
Well, you should learn to control your temper.
The Beast is juxtaposed as a romantic suitor by the addition of Gaston, but as we dive deeper into how their portrayal polarizes masculinity with good and bad models of male behavior, we're left to question what say Belle really has in the matter. Belle is introduced stepping outside of the home, greeting the villagers who call her weird as she passes them, and describes her favorite book, which follows a familiar plotline. While Emma Cochrane praises Disney in her Empire Review for this bookworm heroine, June Cummins points out that what makes her different or not like other princesses is that she reads books about Disney princesses, since she prognosticates her own future when telling the bookstore owner of her favorite story. Cochrane's is high praise for a story where a major part of Belle's character is this wish for adventure, from her introduction to refusing to be Madame Gaston and having her own Sound of Music moment in the hills of the French countryside. She is then forced back into the domestic space by Beast's imprisonment of her and nearly forced into the traditional roles expected of her by Gaston. She doesn't build a friendship as quickly with the Beast as her literary counterpart. Instead, she seems to be terrified of him until he saves her life. Her only weaponizable defense against Gaston's advances is politeness, always kindly turning him down as he tries to back her into a corner. Gaston's introduction symbolizes his worldview and how he fits into it. After he is seen aiming down the sights of his blunderbuss at Belle as though she were his prey, it's clear that he is the village hunk, as all the ladies, except for Belle, swoon over him. Yet he claims that Belle is the only girl for him because she's the most beautiful girl in town, and forces his way into her home, taking the liberty of making himself comfortable and invading Belle's personal space as she attempts to get away from him. Despite getting a face full of mud as his answer, Gaston hatches a surefire plot to gain possession of Belle. As this is set in 18th century France, women are still considered property and thus risk destitution if they don't have a father or husband to claim their personhood. Gaston decides institutionalizing Maurice will force Belle to marry him. However, when he sees that she cares for the Beast instead of him, he rounds up an angry mob to storm the Beast's castle. Gaston gets his karma served to him after the Beast spares his life when his last action is to keep trying to kill the Beast instead of getting to safety. This cements the film's promotion of Beast as a more suitable romantic partner for Belle, because despite the violent aggression he initially displayed towards her, spending time with her led to his literal transformation into the right kind of partner for her. While Gaston is hardly capable of the emotional intelligence required to connect to Belle, Beast doesn't prove himself to be any better a candidate in that regard. When Disney released their live-action adaptation in 2017, they smartly dropped this tagline from their marketing. They also made several updates to the tale to bring it into the 21st century and a post-Me Too era. We still, however, see the male reform narrative strongly at work when the film opens with the Beast, still a human here, getting ready for his engagement ceremony, looking like the definition of Ancien Regime excess and extravagance. We get to see him turn into a beast, and the Enchantress's narration includes the curse's effect on the house staff.
Ah, if it isn't the only bookworm in town.
Belle is portrayed not only as a more versatile bookworm, but just as much an inventor as her father. We also get a glance of the treatment of 18th century women that didn't conform to the social norms of housewife or caretaker. The relationship between Belle and Maurice here is much more like that of father and daughter rather than parent and adultified child, as they bond over their shared grief over the loss of her mother.
Please, just tell me one more thing about her.
Your mother was fearless.
Though she is still polite, Belle is much firmer in her rejection to Gaston, and her words are later repeated verbatim to Gaston by her father.
I might be a farm girl, but I'm not simple, and I'm never going to marry you, Gaston. I'm sorry.
The Beast is not so violent and ready to physically menace in this iteration. He actually acknowledges his own part in the fates of his staff that basically raised him, and new scenes that actually help flesh out the Beast and Belle's potential relationship are added. I think the association of Stockholm Syndrome with the fairy tale was taken into consideration during the writing process as well, especially with this vital exchange.
Are you happy here with me?
Yes.
You think you could be happy here?
Can anybody be happy if they aren't free?
Luke Evans' Gaston only further confirms the real-life implications of hypermasculinity and an inability to handle rejection, reflect, and grow. He actually enlists LeFou in stranding Maurice and leaving him to die, and when confronted about it in the tavern, uses his systemic power to then publicly gaslight Maurice and threaten him with institutionalization. Caitlin Flynn wrote for Bustle in 2016 to commemorate the animated feature's 25th anniversary, calling Gaston the scariest Disney villain of them all because he's an on-screen representation of men who refuse to take no for an answer. This live-action adaptation makes this all the more visceral. While the writers made sure to have Belle question the Beast's views on freedom, they didn't take into consideration the way their own spin on the fairy tale fails to address the culture that enables Gaston to inspire an angry mob to kill the Beast, attempt to separate Belle from her father for life, and feel owed and entitled to Belle's attention and affection.
If I didn't know better, I'd say she even cared for him!
He's not a monster, Gaston. You are.
And since this is 2017 and Disney thinks they can get away with a mere second of representation for the LGBT community so they can still release and promote their films in China, we get to see one of the villagers actually embrace the drag wardrobe dresses him in and dance with LeFou at Belle and Beast's wedding. LeFou is also a much sassier companion, no longer bumbling and stuttering at Gaston's side. We get a pretty funny jab at the time period because of him.
And his name's G-A-S-T. I believe there's another T. It just occurred to me that I'm illiterate and I've never actually had to spell it out loud before.
While Disney makes a decent attempt at modernizing their telling of the tale, there's still the question of how audiences are supposed to process this story. The original fairy tale itself fails to display the reality of platonic relationships between different genders, and the 1991 animation goes a step further in creating a whole new character that practically symbolizes incel culture. And we as a society bought into the whole most beautiful love story ever told claim, thinking that Belle was so amazing because she is both brains and beauty, without any mention of how she is forced into being the damsel in distress. And then the 2017 version shows her as a much more active character in the plot. She is still tasked with showing Beast how to be a better man. If we really want to continue using fairy tales to depict hopefully healthy romantic relationships, they will need a much more desperate revision to fit into the modern era.
You know Shakespeare?
I had an expensive education.
Actually, Romeo and Juliet's my favorite play.
Why is that not a surprise?
I'm sorry?
Well, all that heartache and pining and so many better things to read.
Like what?
That crazy old loon, he needs all the help he can get.
Don't talk about my father that way.
Yeah, don't talk about her father that way.
My father is not crazy. He's a genius.